Hey everybody, I'm Eugene Driscoll. Welcome to Valley Navel Gazing on WNHH 103.5 LP FM. That streams live on valleyindy.org and newhavenindependent.org. You can also get this podcast on iTunes, Libsyn, YouTube, and the aforementioned valleyindy.org. This is a quick episode. It's the start of the new year, so why not talk about horror movies? In Seymour on January 13th, on Friday, January 13th, that's Friday the 13th, Connecticut Cult Classics will be screening a double feature for $10. They're playing Friday the 13th Part 2 and Friday the 13th Part 3. This episode is an interview with Larry Dwyer. He's a Derby resident who started Connecticut Cult Classics. This is his fifth screening. These do well. They have an audience in Connecticut. So I talked to Larry about the movies, about 3D in the early 80s, and stuff like that. He's got another one coming up in March. If you want more, or do you want to learn more about the Connecticut Cult Classics and their screenings at the Strand Theater, which, by the way, is 165 Main Street in Seymour, go to www.connecticutcultclassics.com or check them out on Facebook, facebook.com/Connecticut Cult Classics. Okay, here's Larry. Hello?
Hey, this is Larry from Connecticut Cult Classics.
Hey, Larry, it's Eugene. Thanks a lot for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me, Eugene.
Yeah, no, and your audio's sounding good, so let's just get right into it. So you're hosting another Connecticut Cult Classic screening. Tell us about it.
Yeah, this will be the fifth one that we've done, and we're doing it on Friday, January 13th at the Strand Theater in Seymour.
And then the movies that'll be screening this time are?
Friday the 13th, Part 2, and Friday the 13th, Part 3, shown in glorious 80s 3D.
On a June night in 1980, Friday the 13th, 12 of her friends were murdered. Why should Friday the 13th, 1981 be any different? Friday the 13th, Part 2.
Yeah, I was thinking back, Friday the 13th, Part 3, I remember distinctly when that movie came out, and it was during this whole weird resurgence of bad 3D, Jaws 3D, with Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr. being the other one that came out around the same time.
Absolutely.
So you're going to have the 3D glasses out for that, and I guess plenty of beer, or no?
Unfortunately, John and the Knights of Columbus don't have beer at the Strand, which is odd because I'm sure they drink a lot of beer at the Knights of Columbus, but yeah, they don't serve alcohol there, which is peculiar. But there is a bar nearby and a parking lot. Yeah, people can do whatever they want, frankly, before they enter the theater.
Or you can if you're looking to catch a buzz, just watching Friday the 13th Part 3 will provide it all that's needed, I'm sure.
I am fully giving people the disclaimer, especially if they've never seen that kind of 3D, that you probably will leave with a headache. Your eyes will probably hurt, and you may even get a little nauseous.
And so obviously it's going to be, it's Friday the 13th, January Friday the 13th when these things will be happening. But why particularly, of all, I think there's been 102 Friday the 13th entries. What made you zero in and choose Part 2 and Part 3?
Great question. For our last double feature, we did what I called an 80s slasher-versary, where we were celebrating anniversary of two slasher films. One of them, I knew I was going to do The Burning, because that's just always been a favorite. And the second one, I couldn't decide between Friday the 13th Part 2 and April Fool's Day. So I put it to a vote on the website, and April Fool's Day won by a very slim margin, but Friday the 13th Part 2 got such a great amount of votes that I just said to myself, I have to show it. People want to see it. It's my favorite. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like part one, and I think everybody likes part one. But if you're doing Friday the 13th, you got to celebrate Jason. That's how I feel. And my favorites with Jason are 2 and 3. So I figured let's get 2, which everybody voted for.
No, hold on, Larry. Wait, come on now, Larry. Hold on. I got to interrupt. Where's the love for part 4, the final chapter? Not only do you have Corey Feldman, you got Crispin Glover in there. Come on. Where's the love for part 4?
Listen, Crispin Glover in what may be the best dance scene ever captured on film.
Yes.
Yeah. Other than that dance scene, actually, Friday the 13th Part 4 is where I wish they would have stopped. I think Part 4 was a fine ending, even though Corey Feldman was not a fine actor to give Jason his send off. But I think they should have stopped in Part 4. And I got a love for Part 4, but it's a double feature. I got to pick 2, so I'm going 2 and 3.
And what's interesting, I mean, horror fans obviously know this, but maybe to our non-horror Valley Indie navel-gazing listeners, which is probably 99% of the audience right now. Part 3, I mean, Jason Voorhees is, like one of the modern. He's the Wolfman to like the post-baby boomer generation, I guess.
Sure.
Maybe even the baby. He's like a universal monster. He's like that. He's to modern audiences what those characters were to people growing up in the 30s and 40s. But he didn't get his iconic mask until Part 3, right? Do people even remember that at this point? They took him 3 movies to settle in on that look.
I think it depends on the age of the person you're talking to. I think if you talk to a younger person, they're going to think that Jason was running around with that hockey mask killing people in Part 1, not even realizing that he was just a little boy in the lake. And then Part 2, they did the whole town that dreaded sundown look, and it wasn't until Part 3 that Jason killed one of the most annoying characters in the history of horror victims, a guy by the name of Shelley, and was able to take from him the iconic hockey mask that we love today. So yeah, it wasn't until the 3rd film that we got to see what is now probably the most widely recognized symbol of horror in the world, I would say.
I was going back and I was looking at Wikipedia, of course, because that's where I get all my information for everything at valleyindie.org. Wikipedia, and I think it was Friday the 13th Part 3 when it came out. It came out in 1982, and it made more money, a lot more money than John Carpenter's The Thing. How do you react to that looking back? What was going on in 1982 that more people paid money to see a kind of cheesy 3D movie instead of what is now regarded as a classic?
Well, you just hit the nail on the head with saying now regarded. The Thing was a critical failure when it came out. It was a flop. It was considered silly by the media, and I think it was in and out of the theaters pretty quickly, which is astounding because it is just inches behind Halloween to me as John Carpenter's best movie, and is now widely known as one of the best horror / sci-fi films ever. But when it hit the theater, people did not like it. People did not care. Plus, you got to remember Friday the 13th was already kind of a household name at that time. 1 and 2 were so successful that people were geared up to see Part 3.
And then getting a bit geeky here, I've always admired, I remember seeing Friday the 13th Part 2 as a kid. Maybe I was 10. I remember it was, the Friday the 13th movies were staples in early VCR use. They'd be on TV, they'd be on whatever cable. And Amy Steele, I always thought, is underappreciated as a character, her character in that movie. She really kicks butt. She's not sort of cowering in the corner. What's your impression of her performance in Friday the 13th Part 2?
I thought Amy Steele as Ginny was fantastic, and you're right. She put on. She was. I think she urinated while she was hiding at one point, or was that that could have been Part 1? Maybe I'm getting those confused, but she was
maybe you're throwing in your personal life there. I don't know what's going on there, Larry.
That's possible. I might have urinated just now. I have no idea.
Let's just gloss over that.
She was, she threw on Jason's mother's dirty old bloody sweater, pretended to be Jason's mom, stuck the machete into his shoulder, waited with the pitchfork when she thought he was going to run through the door. She was, in a time where most women in horror were just victim-y. She was kind of a badass. She was a tough chick, and little side note, they originally wanted to bring her back in part 3, and wanted to do almost kind of rip off of Halloween 2, and have Jason track her down in like a mental institution or something. But she didn't want to reprise the role, so they dropped it and went back to the woods, thankfully.
And that was that. And so, okay, so this is the 5th screening you're doing up at the Strand Theater in Seymour. What's been the most popular? Which one sold the most tickets?
Far and away, Stephen King night.
Why
King night was...
Yeah, what'd you show? What'd you show that night?
That was Creep Show and why am I blanking? Christine, I'm sorry. Creep Show and Christine.
That's some other early 80s classics. Creep Show came out the same year as The Thing, Poltergeist, and Friday the 13th Part 3. So that was a pretty killer year for the horror genre.
Yep, and Christine, I've always considered to be an underrated John Carpenter. It's, you watch Christine, and there's John Carpenter's thumbprints and fingerprints all over that film, from the eerie music to just the direction. I've always liked, even though it's kind of a silly concept, I've always actually really liked that movie, and so did other people. Like I said, Stephen King night was huge. You could barely move in that theater that night. We had a lot of people there that night. And
so, who goes to these screenings? Are they primarily people from the immediate area? Are they from all over? And how many people? I mean, if you sell out, how many people is that?
Well, the Strand fits about 250 comfortably. Well, I wouldn't say comfortably. 250 elbow to elbow. It's actually a little bit more than that, but I wouldn't sell any more than 250 into the place. And the majority are from Connecticut. Everywhere from Stamford to Hartford. But I also have had, for the past 3 screenings, a couple people from Jersey, a couple people from New York, a couple people from Pennsylvania come in. The people from Jersey, this will be their 4th one. They come, they get a hotel room, and they really love it. They told me that their favorite part is the trailers that I show before each movie. That's what they love.
Oh, no kidding. So those are all, I assume they're genre-related horror trailers as well?
Not all horror. I kind of try to find some of the craziest stuff that... the thing with the trailers is I don't show any trailer for a movie that I've never seen. So I search back into my catalog and find stuff like Duke Mitchell's Gone with the Pope, Bad Taste, Lady Terminator, Ricky O. So there's some martial arts stuff in there, the Octagon. I try to mix in everything. I think I got DC Cab. I got the trailer for DC Cab going this time.
DC Cab is making the rounds on cable. I was watching it the other day with Mr. T. That's like an all-star cast in that movie. You forget how many people
really
were in that movie.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Not particularly a great movie, but
no. But you had a young Bill Maher, Gary Busey. It's a kind of kooky movie, but I've always liked it, and I was able to get a trailer for this time, so I'm kind of psyched about it.
And then I saw on your event page on Facebook, there was talk about, I don't know if it's still available, you're giving away posters or selling posters along with the screening coming up January 13th?
Yep. At one of these screenings I've done, a kid by the name of Matt Wilson came up to me and said, I'd really love to help out. I'm an artist. I'd love to do some stuff, because I've always, at all of them, I do some giveaway. I do a lot of raffles. I'll buy some stuff and raffle off autographed items and stuff like that. And the raffles don't cost anything. Just anybody who pre-orders a ticket is automatically entered in the raffle. And then I always do giveaways, stickers or magnets or buttons or something like that. And this kid Matt was like, "Hey, I'd really like to, to help out and do that. I've got all this stuff at home as far as art equipment." So for 80s/anniversary, he came through with a whole grab bag of buttons and stuff, and he made some 11x17 posters that were pretty awesome that we gave away. This time around, he made a custom 11x17 poster for the Friday the 13th double feature that we're actually selling for only $3, along with the tickets. I'm sure we'll raffle some of those away as well. He's making little grab bags for this one too. And I've already got a bunch of the raffle prizes. I've got an 11x17 Part 2 poster autographed by Steve Dash to raffle off. Got some good stuff.
That's pretty cool. And if people want to learn more about the event coming up, it's at facebook.com, Connecticut Cult Classics, or you can go to ConnecticutCultClassics.com. And again, it's Friday, January 13th, from 7 p.m. until about midnight. You can watch Friday the 13th, Part 2 and Part 3. And what is it, $10 for the whole thing?
$10 for the whole thing. You know, and the good thing, the guys at the Strand, they keep concession prices down, so you don't have to pay $12 for a popcorn either. It's a pretty cheap night for 2 movies, all the trailers to show, the raffles. It's a pretty cheap night. And
anybody are looking to get there early, if you're not familiar with Seymour and you're hearing this, the Strand Theater is at 165 Main Street in Seymour. It's right off Route 8. There's a bar right next door. There's a good Italian restaurant within walking distance. You get some decent options up there. It's a nice little downtown. So, all right, Larry, what do you have coming up after this one? What are some? What's a glimpse into the future screenings of Connecticut Cult Classics?
Sure. Our next event after this is going to be on March 18th, which is back to Saturdays. I generally do these on Saturdays, but I couldn't skip the opportunity to do a Friday the 13th on Friday the 13th. So the next one's going to be Saturday, March 18th. I don't generally give away much information leading up to the event, but I will tell you that we discussed one of the films just today. You and I, in the past 10 minutes, have discussed one of the films that I'll be showing on March 18th, and that's as much as I'm going to say about it.
The Thing?
I can't tell you, but we definitely discussed one of the films.
Will Corey Feldman be appearing?
If he does, he's going to be singing with his angels.
I'd like it. I'd pay to see that. I paid $20.
But yeah, I think actually, and part of this double feature is going to be the first non-horror movie I've shown at one of my double features.
Oh, so, that's fascinating. Wow.
Yeah.
But all right, so you've mentioned the Octagon. You're a Chuck Norris guy. I'm wondering what type of. Can you at least give the genre of the non-horror film? Is it karate, kung fu?
No, it's not. I would say it's comedy / sci-fi.
Comedy. Oh, now we all have to guess. All right, this will be. I'm gonna hang up on you, and I'll spend the rest of this podcast trying to figure that out.
You got it, bud.
All right, Larry. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes to talk to us about Connecticut Cult Classics, and good luck on January 13th.
Thanks, Eugene. I appreciate it, man. Have a great one.
Weekends are a good time to escape to the woods. Unless the weekend begins with Friday the 13th. Because 13 is an unlucky number. But out here, so are 1 through 12. Because these are Jason's woods. And nobody leaves them alive. Friday the 13th, Part 3.
Okay, so that was Larry Dwyer of Connecticut Cult Classics. Larry is a Derby resident like myself, and to wrap up,
I didn't know that it took 3.
Wait, let me introduce you for God's sakes, because I already put in a beginning of this.
Right.
Now it's over. I have much more energy. I recorded the first part of this podcast just alone in a room. That's why I'm so subdued. It's a weird thing to do. But that's Ethan Fry.
That was not the voice of Donald Trump you just heard. It's just me.
ValleyIndy.org, the other reporter.
But I was going to say, I didn't know Jason didn't get his mask until the third movie. I've obviously...
You see, I mean, people wonder why ValleyIndy.org is here. The reason we get grant money is to... That's why. That's our mission, to correct the record or to inform the public. Yes, Friday the 13th, Jason didn't get his hockey mask until the third movie, which gives you an idea of they really had they didn't know what they were doing with those movies. So.
Is that the one with Crystal Lake? Is that...
Those are the Friday the 13th movies. Yes, those are All of them.
Like on the
20 of
original NES way back in the day. At some
who?
point, I got
What is that?
Nintendo.
Oh, okay.
Nintendo Entertainment System. Somebody gave me like a Friday the 13th game, and I remember like I didn't know what the point of it was. It was just seemed bizarre. Like
I think
they just like slapped Friday the 13th onto a game. And
I believe I could be totally wrong here, but why fact check? Why start at this point? That's a famous game because it was basically impossible to do anything.
Yeah,
you would just walk 3 feet. Jason would come out and kill you.
No, yeah.
It's regarded like as one of the most frustrating games of all time.
Sounds accurate. Yeah.
So anyway, right before I went live with Mr. Dwyer of Connecticut Cult Classics, I had put I had emailed some friends, messaged some friends of mine who one guy's a screenwriter, the other guy does movie effects, gore movie effects, for questions. What should I ask about part 2 and part 3 of the Friday the 13th franchise? Neither of those guys got back to me, but I do another blog, like a blog I do for giggles on the side called the Mobile Horror Companion, and on that Facebook page, somebody actually asked a question that I should have asked Larry, but anyway, I'm just going to read it. It's a pretty good question. I'm paraphrasing parts. Friday the 13th Part 3 was released in 3D. Were most of the effects intentionally created to capitalize on that? Because it doesn't seem like they were. Yeah, if you've ever tried to go back and watch Jaws 3, the 3D one that takes place in like a Disney or SeaWorld type place, it's laughable how bad the 3D graphics were. Then he says, Bruce Sakaw, one of my film school teachers, created the story for Part 4.
Wow.
And I'd argue that Part 4 is the best in the franchise, if for Crispin Glover alone.
Oh, yeah. I also Googled that or searched for that dance scene on YouTube. It's like Elaine from Seinfeld, bad. Like, that is.
It's great. It's a great movie. He claims, this is Matt's film school teacher, that his initial idea was to create a story that was an attack on the Reagan-era family values, and that his initial draft was about a family that moved to the lake sans teens having sex. Sakaw said the producers put in teens having sex in the house next door to the family behind his back. How much of that script to Part 4 was rewritten on the set?
They brought in a punch-up guy.
And then my
they
favorite
brought in David Mamet to
my favorite part of this comment / question is the last line. I realize this has nothing to do with parts 2 or 3. I just want to know. But I'm sorry, Matt. That is a great question, and thanks for sharing. But actually, we have no idea.
You've always said, I've never watched this movie, but like that big zombie movie from like the 60s, wasn't that just like a commentary on consumerism? Because like they all go to the mall for refuge or whatever.
You're going to have to start listening to my other podcast I do on the weekends because we debate this. George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. It's considered now, whether Romero had it in mind when he made it, but that's the thing about movies, you know what I mean? Even horror movies, even zombie movies, it's art and it's open to interpretation. And the interpretation of Dawn of the Dead is that it is a total comment, parody of our consumer culture. Yeah, it takes place in a mall, and the characters in the movie, as the zombie apocalypse is taking place outside, they still sort of cling to these material things, if you read into the movie. And the Night of the Living Dead had an African-American protagonist, which was
right,
and they never make a big deal of it in any way, and it's thought to be all commentary that was made in about 1967 about civil rights movement. Romero has said, and in fact, Larry Dwyer, who was just our guest on this podcast, interviewed George Romero, the creator of the zombie genre, essentially the modern zombie genre, in Danbury back in August at the CT Horror Fest. It was a horror convention that happens now in Connecticut. And Romero is asked that question all the time. And basically he says, well, it wasn't conscious on our part. On my other podcast, I do with the screenwriter is always sort of slapping me around, saying that he doesn't think like when you write a movie, all that stuff, that people just stick that onto it, that the writer doesn't think of that when they're doing it, and basically chides me for being a bad 8th grade English teacher, essentially looking into meaning where there is not. But what does he know? He's not on this podcast.
No, yeah, and who knows what the creator does, inserts these things subconsciously, without without knowing that that's what the commentary is. You could make that argument.
And for me, I mean, we just talked. I mean, Friday the 13th Part 2 and Part 3. They're they're movies. They're obviously not high art, but I love. You go back and you look at that whole bizarre slasher genre that happened. It was a real movement in American film. All these horror movies that were happening, definitely a reflection of the culture. I love to look back at these things and try to figure out what was going on in the country, or what was it reflecting. I think that stuff's fascinating. But other people, think that's just total BS. That's the yin and yang, pull and pull, push and pull of whatever. But anyway, so. Horror movies. We had talked. Oh, it was a Kurt Miller, Seymour First Selectman Kurt Miller podcast, which we ramble. We really have nothing prepared when Kurt comes in. Although last one we actually, there were legitimate news items on the local level that I failed to ask because we got talking about I think horror movies in that one too. And he had said his favorite horror movie was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory
right,
mistake, which is But what was your you couldn't think of one? I think what's your? I
wasn't sure whether The Shining would qualify, but I guess
of course it does.
That's probably it, because I remember watching that in. I had never seen it before. I saw it in college. I was an RA in college, so I was in the dorm over winter break. And it was really weird to be watching that movie in a completely empty college dorm during the winter, as because it parallels the there was no torrents of blood coming out of any elevators, or I didn't hallucinate little screaming red rum, or was it Danny?
No, that's that's Danny who.
Let's not give away too much if you haven't seen The Shining.
But didn't you watch the documentary, the Kubrick documentary on Netflix about the room number or whatever?
Room 237. I saw that.
You watched? Oh, but you had seen The Shining.
I had seen it. Yeah. I know people who haven't, who have watched it in reverse. That's interesting. But yeah, that's and that sort of dovetails into the argument you were just mentioning about. How much of this was Kubrick's intention, or how much, we'll never know. The guy's dead, obviously. But people read into the can of coffee behind the guy in the first scene as he's talking in in the room in the hotel. Kubrick intended that to mean X, Y, and Z about the American Indian being, et cetera, genocide and everything. That's did he really, or was it just a cool coffee can to put there?
Yeah, I had to turn that documentary off actually, because I just thought it was so insane.
Because
reading Breitbart.
Yeah, I thought it was, it was interesting speculation, but that's what it is at the end of the day. It's still speculation.
Closing out this podcast, because why not have a local news podcast talk about movies? Because that's no one will listen.
You have to.
But as of this recording, we're recording this before Christmas. Actually, we're trying to get ahead on some of these podcasts because they're labor intensive to do, and we're reporters as well. We write the stories, edit the stories, take pictures for the stories, in addition to recording and editing, setting up interviews for these podcasts every week. But Kirk Douglas, just turned 100. And I saw something on Variety on Twitter. They had Douglas talking about Stanley Kubrick and basically that he was a bastard. They hated each other.
But creative. He gave him that.
But I love that Kirk Douglas, to this day, because they asked about Eyes Wide Shut, and he's just it was terrible.
I remember, I think somebody, somebody who I would know was reading a biography of Kirk Douglas a few years ago, and they said, when they were making Spartacus, I think that had been written by somebody on the Blacklist, and Kubrick was involved. I don't know if Kubrick actually directed the movie or not, but it was written by, I don't know if it was Dalton Trumbo or somebody, or Carl Foreman, somebody like that, on the Blacklist at the time. And they didn't know whether they were going to actually credit this person or not. And I guess Kubrick was just willing to take credit for having written the movie, even though he had nothing to, he did not write the movie. He was just just put my name on it. And
I didn't know he was involved in Spartacus, to be honest with you. But Paths of Glory, which is just
I haven't watched
great,
that. Yeah,
it's a great
I've
movie.
started watching it like a couple weeks ago, but I've got to finish it. Yeah.
But anyway, so that's so we touched upon Friday the 13th, Part 2, Part 3. We talked about The Thing. We mentioned there's a Chuck Norris Octagon. Man, listen, for what you people are paying for this podcast, this is the best darn thing going, I think. So anyway,
Okay.
are you looking
from
something
the
up?
from the Spartacus Wikipedia page? Screenwriter Dalton Trumbo was blacklisted at the time as one of the Hollywood 10. Douglas publicly announced that Trumbo was the screenwriter of Spartacus, and President-elect John F. Kennedy crossed American Legion picket lines to view the film, helping to end blacklisting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Wow, what a weird... It's probably all coming back, though.
But, Kubrick did direct
Trump's
it.
in power. We'll have a blacklist in no time. All right, and on that note, while we're still
Kirk
able
Douglas
to...
published an op-ed calling in, against an anti-Trump op-ed. I just saw this. A link to it on Twitter. So.
Oh, no kidding. So while we're still legally able
Happy
to do this...
100th, Mr. Douglas.
To do this podcast, my name is Eugene Driscoll, and that was Ethan Fry, and we're at valleyindy.org, and we will talk to you next time.